Hello, everyone, and welcome to a studio. Welcome, Eynat Katz and Sol Nayman. Welcome to a studio. I think we have a very special show today. So why don't we start with you, Eynat, and tell us a little bit about the big gala that you just attended.
So last night, Sol and I had the privilege of being part of a very special evening. I, along with a great, committed and very dedicated team from the March of the Living, put together a gala event for our Holocaust survivor educators to honor them and to create a scholarship fund. And the idea behind the scholarship fund is many of the March of the Living participants come from our day schools and some come from our public schools. And they go when they're in grade 11. And we would like to make it accessible to everyone. And one of the difficulties that come up when you come to the March of the Living or want to join is that it's costly, but it's costly for a reason. It's a real quality education program where you have survivors that are with us and Holocaust educators that come along with us. And so parents often say, you know, it's so expensive, we can't afford it, what can we do? And so honoring the survivors and putting together a scholarship fund in their name, and also honoring Ellie Rubenstein, who's the National Educational Director of the March of the Living. The idea came forward in order to have these funds to be able to subsidize families that can't afford.
It's beautiful. I think it's very, very important. I'm sorry to say that I haven't had the pleasure of going on this trip, which is probably not a pleasure, but I would like to go. So talk to us a little bit, Sol.
Well, this was my third trip. And it's been transformative for me, and particularly for the grade 11, 17-year-olds. We had 6 bus loads this year, just from Toronto.
Wow.
Which is about
that's amazing.
230 students, as well as young adults and adults. So our total group was
far larger than that. Between the adults, there were 3 buses, the young adults, and as you mentioned, the 6 buses of students.
Wow. I just want to ask, for instance, you know, it started a long time ago, what, 30 years now?
It actually started exactly 30 years ago, because I was on the very first March of the Living back in 1988.
So my question was going to be, and I know how it affected you. Yes. I was going to ask for all those people all over the year, during the years that actually go on those marches, do you see a lot of them like back? Do you see like that influence that it had on them? I mean, I can see that it did for you, but
I can speak to that directly. The greatest reward I as a survivor have is the comments we get from the students. They are so full of love. They are so full of gratitude to me, to us, to the survivors. I prefer to turn it around. There's great gratitude for me. That's the fuel that keeps me going. I'm sort of a rookie on the trip, having gone only 3 times compared, for example, to Anita Eckstein and Nate Leipziger, who were there on their 18th trip. Wow. For me to make it to 18, I'd have to be, I guess, around 97.
So why would somebody go 18 times? Is it to honor? It's basically to honor, or is it they're part of the education?
I believe, emphatically, it is part of their education, educating our students. And one of the critical questions that are always asked, what will happen after the survivors are all gone? Because the current generation of students who are going on the march are the last generation who will be there with survivors. And that is why it's so important to have these interviews, to have this dialogue, to have the archives. The archives will certainly endure longer than we will. And it is very important, as I think Elie Wiesel said.
100 years from now, what will happen to our great-great-grandchildren?
So this is what we've been working on.
And one of the key beliefs that we all share is when you speak to a survivor, you become a witness. When you speak to a witness, you become a witness. So these 250, 300,000 students who have been on the march in the past 30 years, They are our witnesses.
Absolutely.
And that is why I believe the March of the Living is such a critical element of conveying the story, not just of the Shoah. We don't want to talk just about how Jews died, because we have the transition to Israel, how our people have been resurrected,
right,
how our people have grown,
yes,
and become an incredible nation in this very huge, very impersonal world.
And what I'd like to add to that and elaborate a little bit is what we see is that the participants of the March of the Living, like myself, then become activists in our community, and they take on different roles, both in the diaspora as well as many of them that go back to Israel, either make aliyah or become involved in different ways in Israel to contribute, whether it's to the army or whatever they want to.
Mm-hmm.
But the March of the Living really turns you into an activist, because you can't go through a journey like that, an experience like that, and then sit back and say, okay, so I heard it. It touches you and it resonates with you in a way that allows you then to carry it forward in different ways in our Jewish community.
See, I'm a believer that if only for never forgetting. You can't forget, because I'm a believer that if we forget, it will repeat itself. That's how we can never, ever forget. And that's why I believe that what you're doing is so important for, not even for the next generation, for the next 10 generation. So they will not forget, and they will be a believer that the Holocaust actually did occur.
So that's why we're so grateful to our Holocaust survivor educators, because they give the voice of the person who was there, who witnessed it. And as Sol said, and in the words of Elie Wiesel, when you hear a witness, you become a witness. And so when people like Sol are not able to join us, people like myself who've heard Sol's stories and have shared the experience with him can continue the journey.
The other thing, the March of the Living doesn't stop after the 2 weeks. We have ongoing dialogue with the children who were with us and others. I have a whole slew of invitations to speak at schools, churches, synagogues.
That's great.
And that, to me, is critically important. What we learn, what we absorb on the march, the week in Poland and the week in Israel, is engraved in our souls forever. And each year, there's a new experience. And if I may, my most compelling experience this year was at Mini Israel on Erev Yom Ha'atzmaut. We had just transitioned from Yom HaZikaron to Yom Ha'atzmaut. And I stood on the stage at Mini Israel, and I shared with the entire Canadian group from Vancouver, Ottawa, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, an experience that I never dreamed could possibly happen. On May 14th, 1948, 70 years ago, I was in a DP camp in Wetzlar, West Germany. I was in school, and our teacher told us that we would hear a special broadcast in the afternoon. We gathered around his desk, and on a shortwave radio, we heard David Ben-Gurion proclaim the declaration of the State of Israel. And for me to stand on the bima 70 years later, to acknowledge that moment and to recite Shehecheyanu was a moment.
Make me cry now.
Well, I always cry at those moments. Yes. But to me, that is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I could never have experienced. Yes, I could have experienced Yom Ha'atzmaut in Toronto or somewhere else.
It's not the same.
But to be there.
And imagine Sol sharing that with all the students and all of us who were there. How powerful that experience is and how it brings it to life for us. And if I may, I think one of the reasons why I so much believe in what the March of the Living does, as opposed to many other groups that do Holocaust education, because everybody does Holocaust education in a different way, is that we have our survivor educators that are involved, and that's the direct connection. One of the things that I would very much like for Sol to share with us is Sol was thinking of what can he say? Every survivor speaks in a different place where they were at, where they were either liberated or they lost their family or they experienced something personal, to personalize it for the kids. And I think something beautiful that Sol did was he tried to connect it to our youth today. What would be relevant to them? And he wrote something in a text format that I think really speaks to the youth today. And I know when he shared it with the students, and I asked him to share it with our adult group as well, everybody was just speechless. So if I can trouble you to actually share it with us, I think that would be amazing.
Yes.
Well, I'm reminded by Eynat, I think you should become my chronologist, if that is a proper word. On my first trip, we were in Majdanek, and I was supposed to speak at the Chachmei Yeshiva. And I had prepared my remarks that would reflect being at this Makom Kodesh, at this incredible yeshiva. 9 o'clock before we left Warsaw for Lublin, I was told we won't be able to get to Chachmei Yeshiva because there are too many buses from all over the world. You'll speak at Majdanek, for which I wasn't prepared. I would have loved to have spoken at Treblinka because that was my neighborhood death camp, 25 kilometers from the shtetl where I was born. So on the drive to Lublin, I had to refocus. I had my BlackBerry cell phone, and this is not a commercial for BlackBerry.
I was going to say BlackBerry.
And I'm on the bus with my grandson beside me, typing this. And finally, we get to Majdanek, where I shared a little bit of my life story. And I held up the cell phone and I said, I'm going to send a text. And the text is to Adolf Hitler, Reinhard Heydrich, and Adolf Eichmann.
Wow.
And the subject is final solution. To you and every murdering Nazi in whichever hell you are, I have returned to Poland for the first time since we escaped in 1939, and I wanted to give you a status report on the final solution 75 years later. We started in Krakow, Kazimierz, and I could not believe my eyes. Hasidic Jews in black suits and hats with long beards and payas walking around the town and praying at the cemetery. This looked like a scene from 1916, not 2016. In the evening, I and several hundred other Jews sang Hatikva in a synagogue. Can you believe this could possibly happen 75 years after the final solution? I came here with my grandson Moshe Baruch, 4 generations after the final solution. He celebrated his 17th birthday and together with a bunch of Jews prayed in the lobby of a hotel in Poland, believe it or not. After you murdered 6 million of our people, I and thousands others from 40 countries took a stroll from Auschwitz to Birkenau, linking arms with several dozen survivors who will never forget or forgive you. Remember the kid from Buchenwald, Israel Meir-Lau? Well, he is chief rabbi of one of the largest cities in a country that did not exist when you did. But your friend Adolf Eichmann was there once and never left. Yes, we Jews have our own country, and now, and it's not Madagascar, where you thought we should be moved to. It's called Israel. Later, we will fly there on an airline called El Al. Can you believe the Jewish chutzpah, our own state, with our own airline? We also have a great Air Force and a superb army. the whole 9 yards. Just so you know, this is being sent from Majdanek. I was supposed to be in Lublin, where your pal Reinhard Heydrich set up the Final Solutions headquarters. Remember the Chachmei Yeshiva, which your buddies looted and turned into a military police headquarters? You should see it now, more beautiful than ever and packed with Jews and other visitors from all over the world. How does that grab you? So, 75 years later, we have our own final solution. We call it Never Again. I hope to return to Poland in the future and provide you with more updates to assure you that Jews will be alive forever. Adolf, all you need to know are 3 simple Hebrew words. Am Yisrael Chai. Signed, David Shlomo from Stochek, one who got away. Click send.
So you can see why I said what Sol wrote is a brilliant piece, because it just touches the kids, and all of us, not just kids, any one of us who heard it.
But it's so true.
Right.
It's like the truth.
Yes.
It's like amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. That was so powerful and so moving and so true. I don't know how to come back from that. It's from the heart, 100%.
So I'm going to share with you, when Sol read this, he shared this with not just the students who were there. One of the beautiful things that the March of the Living does and offers is it offers the education and the experience from age 17 onwards.
Perfect.
We have for the young adults that are in the university years and ones that are just beginning their professional lives.
Yes.
And we have for adults. So this year, for example, my husband joined me for the very first time. He's in his 50s. He's never had an opportunity to do this before. And we did it as a family. Wow. My cousin came with us. My sister came with us. And I was very privileged that my daughter, who's now in grade 11, the same time as I went 30 years ago, came with us as well. Wow. And the idea behind it, which we were invited to speak at Birkenau on the day of the actual march. So I'll give you a little bit of background. What we do on the day of the march itself, hence the name March of the Living, is we march from Auschwitz to Birkenau. That was known in those days as the Death March. Yep. And therefore, this is signified as the March of the Living. And this is the picture where it was brilliantly done.
Wow.
In the book that Ellie Rubenstein put together, where you see the Death March, and you see it now being led by the survivors and by all of us as future generations, hence the name March of the Living. And my daughter, who's now 4th generation, the great-granddaughter of 4th generation Holocaust survivor, I was able to pass the torch to her at Birkenau on a very large stage in front of some 13,500 people who were with us across how many countries?
Oh, about 40 countries.
Across 40 countries.
And hundreds and hundreds of non-Jews.
Correct, that joined us. They came and they joined us.
That's very important.
It was so significant. For the day of the march, they came from around Europe. I believe International March of the Living said that there was something like 15,000 people in total.
That's great.
And in fact, I know when I got on stage and I looked, all I could see were people. There was no end. The entire camp of the concentration camp of Birkenau was just filled with our hats and our blue jackets.
Can we hear her speech?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let's take a moment and hear her
My
speech.
participation in the March of the Living is in many ways an example of the strength of the Jewish people. Just a few minutes ago, I marched from Auschwitz to Birkenau with my classmates, with other Jewish teenagers from around the world, with my family, and with Holocaust survivors. If I could go back in time to ask my grandfather and my great-grandfather if they could have ever imagined such a thing, I think I know what their answer would be. Impossible. As I look out onto this massive crowd and look into the eyes of the Holocaust survivors sitting in front of me now, the same Holocaust survivors that stood where I am standing right now all those years ago, looking at the barracks, looking at the smoke coming from the stacks of the crematorium, and standing in the same space that we are all in now. In your wildest dreams, could you have believed back in 1944, some 74 years ago, that today we would stand here together in solidarity and sing Israeli songs? Could you have ever imagined thousands of young Jewish people from around the world, with the President of Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, and the Chief of Staff, all standing together with the Polish President here in Birkenau? Could you have ever imagined that we would all be standing here carrying the flag of Israel, a country that did not exist some 7 decades ago? I know that my grandfather and my great-grandfather would never have believed it. Not even in their wildest dreams would they have thought this to be even a remote possibility. After all, how could the Jewish people from almost total destruction and annihilation rise from the ashes? I strongly believe that this shows us that no matter how dark life can get, there is always a reason to hope. For Jews and non-Jews from around the world to come together, to pledge peace, to come together from a place of love and not hate, I believe that we, all of us here together, represent the ultimate victory against Nazism.
Wow, you must be so proud of that daughter of yours.
I'm very proud.
Yes.
Actually, as we speak, my son left yesterday for March of Remembrance and Hope. It's another arm of the March of the Living that takes non-Jewish university students, along with a Holocaust educator, and Ellie Rubenstein, who's there with them. They left all late because of the gala we had last night.
So important.
And I think my son is the only Jew in that group because he was writing exams at the time we were going. And we wanted to experience it together as a family. So he's now in Berlin with Ellie Gotz, one of the other Holocaust educator survivors, and Ellie Rubenstein. And I think this is a tribute to what they have done for 30 years. You know, this cover came to be as very significant. Agam was actually the one who made the logo. He was with us on the very first trip. I met him back then.
Wow.
And it's the 30th.
For those that don't know, Agam is a very famous Israeli artist.
Right. And we've kept the symbol for 30 years. It's been our symbol, and it's on the back of all of our jackets. And 30 years that we're celebrating of the March anniversary. And of course, it was Israel's 70th. So it was so significant coming together as a full journey, taking them from Shoah to Tkuma, to the birth, to the state of Israel. And as Sol said, which is, I think, what we're really aiming for, is we want to show them Am Yisrael Chai.
That's right.
Am Yisrael is Chai. You know, we're proof of it. Well, you're proof of it, and we're all proof of it. And I keep telling them, we're not going anywhere.
2 years ago, Ellie had called me the night before Yom HaZikaron and said, would you speak at Mini Israel and give us your reflection on the transition from Poland to Israel? And it's easy to say it's from death to life, from dark to light, etc. I said, we should have a reverse bracha of Havdalah, where we say, Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. We should be able to say, Hamavdil ben chol lekodesh. Poland is the chol. Israel is the Kodesh. And that is what is so important. Not just how we died.
No.
It's how we live.
Absolutely. I agree. What can I tell you? Our time is up. All I can say is really, never again. Just never again. That's all we have to fight for. Continue educating our children and the next forever generation. So they shall not forget. Thank you so much. You have to come back. We'll have some more to talk.
We have lots to talk about.
We have lots to talk about. But really, I thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you again next week.